Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to Circle of Fellows. I'm Shel Holtz with the FIR Podcast Network, and 4 fellows joining me today to talk about building your communications career, and really delighted to say that 2 of these are brand new fellows, members of the 2016 class of fellows, Alice Brink and Priya Bates. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're going to be talking, as I said, about building your career. But before we get started, people who are watching would probably be interested in the backgrounds of the fellows who are here today. So Alice and Priya, why don't we start with you, the new fellows. Alice?
Okay. As you said, I'm Alice Brink. I am an independent communications consultant. I've had my own business for about 12 years. Prior to that, I had worked in an agency environment as well as in corporate environments, including the Coca-Cola Company and Conoco. So most of my clients are in the energy business, and I'm based in Houston.
Great. Priya?
And I'm Priya Bates, ABC CMP and fellow in MC. And I'm a president of Inner Strength Communication based in Toronto, Canada. And I'm focused on internal communications, employee engagement, and change management.
Great, and it's wonderful to have you both on the show. We have a couple of other new fellows that have joined our ranks this year, and I'm looking forward to having them on future episodes. But also Sheri, Rosen, and Mark Schumann are here. Sheri, what are you up to?
Well, I think I'm the representative on this group that is in the corporate world again. Now, I work for Frost Bank, which is a large banking investment and insurance company with worldwide reach for customers, but we only have financial centers in Texas, so you may not have heard about it, and I'm really sorry. You need to go look up frostbank.com and find out about it. I have been in employee communication, or some name similar to that, for about 30-plus years, and a member of IABC for more than 40 years. I've also been in the publishing world and PR and consulting and done a lot of those things. So I have been not only in the financial services area, but also in healthcare and energy and nonprofit. And I've worked literally coast to coast to coast in the United States, and I've also worked in Japan. So I've got some of that global experience there, and I'm delighted to be here today. Thank you.
Okay, so you've reinvented yourself a number of times, something we'll be sure to talk about. And Mark, how are things with you?
Oh, just great. In fact, I think that reinvention is certainly a piece of the puzzle for all of us on the call, as well as a fundamental to anyone developing a communication career. It's that ability to take what you learn and rethink it, repackage it, repurpose it. So in the repurposing arena, I spent most of my career at Towers Perrin and left when we got bought in 2010. And since then have reinvented a few times and find myself now spending most of my time as an executive coach, coaching leaders to become better communicators. And funny, when they become better communicators, they become better leaders. And then I also teach at communications at Fairfield University here in Connecticut.
Well, that sounds like a great place to start, Mark, with this idea of coaching leaders. The theme that we're addressing here with building your career is IABC's editorial theme for the month. We're trying to track Circle of Fellows with the editorial theme of the month, and the way they've couched this is it addresses the habits top communication leaders practice to stay relevant, manage their careers, and become trusted and valued advisors to other leaders. And being that trusted and valued advisor to other leaders seems to me that that coaching would be part of that. How has coaching leaders been part of building your reputations and building your careers? And Mark, since you sort of brought that topic up, let's start with you.
Well, I think that when any of us look at our careers, there is a narrative that we build, that we experience, And at different moments in our careers, we need to look back and reflect on what have I accomplished, when was I at my best, when was I pushing it, when was I real, when was I artificial, when did it work, when was it really not working, all those things that make up a career, because there are good days and there are other days when we're trying to figure out what it's all about. So I think that at certain milestones of time, it's really good to reflect and to say, this is the value that I bring, and now let me look at different ways that I can share that value. And that happened to me a few times over the years, most recently about 2 or 3 years ago. And I just looked back and I said, these were the moments when I really made a difference. And how can I continue to make that difference, but in a different way? And how could I shift those skills that I used in the consulting world for most of those years? And how can I shift the outcome to one of coaching? And the difference between consulting and coaching is that consulting is writing the script and coaching is helping the leader discover his or her own script. And so it's a matter of taking what we learn and then working with people to help them discover those lessons. And that's I think a natural curve in the narrative. At least I'm living that.
One of the things I'm really excited about is the work that IABC has done on the career levels, because what it talks about is that foundational level that you start in, the specialist generalist level, moving to strategic advisor, and then moving to business leader, and and how we actually navigate our way through that career and become that leader and advisor at the end of the program. So it's, the certification levels are going to match up with that. Right now the CMP is about specialist generalist, but the next level that they're going to be introducing is strategic advisor. And I think that's really meant to guide us along our career.
I really like what Mark said, and Priya, I agree with you as far as needing to push our careers further. The idea that you need to know yourself and you need to know what it is that you're good at, you enjoy, build on your strengths, understand where your weaknesses are, but really build on your strengths. And that was one of the things that I have seen as my career has gone forward. I entered college expecting to come out a magazine designer because I just thought that was the most fun thing in the world. Somehow I ended up with a journalism degree and I was a writer, which, now both of those have come in handy. But over the first 5 years out of college, I learned that really what I like to do is I like to build things. And that ultimately, I learned, was about strategy and vision. And so those are the sort of the paths I took through the jobs as I got out of college. That was what was me, and that was what was going to work for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but that was what was going to work for me. And I was able to find ways that would work.
I think all of these things are so interesting. From my perspective, a lot of the work that I have done has been coaching leaders in smaller organizations, but I found that when I'm working with a bigger organization, one of the things I'm doing is coaching the communications leaders on how to work with their executives, and that lets them shine in their organization, and I become sort of a mentor.
Yeah, I look back on my corporate career before I went independent, and it was a while before leaders were willing to listen to me. I was a junior staff writer in my first job at a Fortune 15 company. We had 25 people in employee communications, which was part of the HR organization, not part of the PR organization. And, I was lucky if I got to interview a senior executive, no less coach them on their own.
Sorry.
That's okay. No less coach them on their own communication styles. What was your experience in building the kind of credibility and the kind of reputation in the organization that got them to take you seriously?
Well, since I'm in the organization now, I'll see if I can answer that one portion. So I think I have learned, and it's been a hard lesson. It was not something that came easily. It was not my job to build or strategize or have a vision for a communication empire, or the set of tools, the media mix we'd be using, or how we would deliver all of these things out. It's really a
Sheri, your microphone jack, I think, is wiggling loose.
If I go without it, can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Okay, so I'll start over then. What I've learned is that being in a personality of wanting to create the perfect communication department or the perfect communication team, something like that, is not the way to get me where I needed to go in terms of the business. I needed to step back and figure out what was going to help achieve the objectives, the directions we were going, and then put communication into that, and over time it builds an effective communication practice. But really what you're trying to do is you're working with your senior leaders to understand what they are trying to accomplish, what they need to happen, and where communication fits into that. And that was not something that I necessarily came out of the chute to do.
And I agree with you, Sheri, that there's this whole opportunity of truly understanding the business and what the strategy and vision is, and being able to use that communication expertise to tie it all up. And that's something that you learn that we weren't traditionally taught, but you learned in terms of where you got the traction and effectiveness and the respect, because you were able to work with that leader to solve their problems through a communication solution.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think my view of this has been influenced by having watched too many movies. But I think that every organization has a narrative, and every leader plays a role in that narrative. And some are villains, and some are heroes, and some are innocent bystanders, and some should be put away. And I think that where, and I try to help my students picture this, is when we help a leader envision what that narrative is and what his or her role in that narrative is, that helps the leader own the moment and own the relationships and own the outcomes. When we help the leader achieve that sense of ownership, talking about communication as a way, a means to an end, becomes an easy conversation, because we're not having to do that kind of traditional selling of our value and all that we used to sometimes have to get so focused on. But when we help the leader own the outcome, then they want what we bring.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find that concept of the company narrative really fascinating, and have for a long time, Mark. Engage for Success, which is the British initiative to bring employee engagement principles into British organizations, sees the strategic company narrative as one of the four foundations, one of the four drivers of employee engagement. So from an internal communication standpoint, knowing that narrative and helping employees figure out where they fit in it, and helping executives be the ones who tell that story is really important. And I think sometimes we get wrapped up in this idea that we're there to ferret out good articles or good videos to share that employees will find interesting enough to read, without having that strategic underpinning, that strategic foundation that actually accomplishes something that's important to the leaders, and building engagement certainly is.
Yeah.
And if I could sort of build on your thoughts about the narrative, I think that one of the things that actually moved in my career development is the job path that I took in my first 5 years out of college, because I know that now the stereotype seems to be that millennials change jobs too fast, because they'll stay for 6 months and then go for 12 months and then go for 18 months and back to 6 months to their first jobs. But I had 5 different jobs in the first 6 years out of college. So it's other people than just the young folks to do that. And what that did was that gave me a chance to see the narrative in different places. And sometimes I think if you stay a long time at first with one company, you think that that's what business is, But if you have an opportunity to see a lot of different things, either because it's your career path or you're in a consulting role and you're in with a lot of companies, you really understand better how that works and how you can be a part of that.
Yeah, we do have people who are watching live, and over on the right-hand side of the screen there is a tool that will allow you to submit questions, and I would encourage you to do so. If there's anything you would like to ask of the panel in general, or any one panelist specifically, just share that question, and I'll make sure I read it out and get an answer for you. In the meantime, you know, as I was doing a little bit of research before we started, bouncing around on Google looking for communications career advice, what some of the thought leaders are saying and what some of the conventional wisdom is, I kept coming across this: you need to be a great writer. And I certainly agree with that. I think it's tough to be in the communications business without knowing how to write, and I find it a little distressing that I find it a little distressing that there are universities now that are teaching communications programs that don't have writing requirements in them. And I also think that's relevant both on the tactical side, if you're going to come in at a junior level and produce content, but also on the strategic side, because you have to be able to articulate in reports what the data that you're getting means, and you know, make your case to leadership for doing what you know is right. How important do you think the writing skills are today?
Well, let me respond to that. I think that one of the things that we've done is we've sort of evolved away from calling those communication skills writing skills.
Right.
I think that the skills are essential: the ability to articulate an idea, the ability to tell a story, the ability to help people move from A to B to C. And those are, you know, the essential skills. I think when people hear writing, they think grammar. And that is, I think grammar is an essential skill, but it's also something that there are now tools to prop you up on. But that essential strategy of communication, I think, will never go away.
Yeah, Alice, I think you're so right, and I see it at two different ends of the spectrum, in kids who are just starting in school, and then kids who should be adults. And I find that sometimes I can't tell between, and it's all back, you know, Alice, precisely to what you say. It's that ability. One of the classes I teach is called Argument and Advocacy, and I love the title.
Can I come take it?
It's wonderful because it's all about how do I find and form a point of view, and but the context for that point of view is the relationship I'm trying to build. And I find that when you get people to focus on the relationship and what I do to advance the relationship, then they see the importance of clarity. And so it's all about clarity, and that clarity is the issue, whether it's spoken clarity, written clarity, tweeted clarity, whatever.
And the thing I always talk about is that it's kind of the difference between the art and the science.
Yeah.
And you know, there are communicators who are out there who just love the art, and they love the prose, and they love creating, you know, beautiful pieces. For me, it's the science. What's the result? Where is this going to go? What's your hypothesis? And it really is a combination of both when it's done really well. Yes. So you always want to have that balance of really great art, because we see wonderful, wonderful writers out there. But when it really counts, and where you get that respect, is when you actually accomplish a result with your communication.
Yeah, I think another dimension of writing is staying current with the trends in writing. I mean, the fact that I can write a feature story the way I was taught in journalism school in the early 70s doesn't necessarily position me to write the captions for a video that's going to be played on Facebook with the audio off. So I think there's this need to continuously adapt your writing skills to the channels and the platforms that are being used for communication, you know, today, and the ones that are coming tomorrow. I read an article, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, that talked about the fact that Silicon Valley is now hiring writers away from Hollywood to write the scripts for chatbots, so that these chatbots are going to sound more human and engaging and entertaining for the people who are interacting with them. So, I mean, there's new work for writers, but, within the corporate communications world, certainly we're going to be called upon to advise on that, and maybe to hire for that, and for people at the tactical level to actually produce content for that.
So what you're really talking about, I think, Shel, is being a lifelong learner. You may have writing skills, you may have honed writing skills, and you may have been able to produce some good text or whatever it might be at some point in your career, and that's not going to take you through to the end. You have to have that innate interest and curiosity to always be learning something different, doing something different, so that you can create something different as you go through and grow with your career.
And one of the things that's amazing is that the kids right now, I mean, I've got a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old, do this intuitively. They can't spell. None of my kids can spell. But how they can use the technology and the communication to get where they want to go is absolutely amazing. And I had a chance to attend a elementary school film festival where the kids who produced this work were 8 to 12. Yeah. And the work that I was seeing blew my mind. Yeah. Voiceovers, script writing, bringing it all together under a premise, whether it was creating a PSA or a trailer or a stop-motion animation film. They were able to use the technology and get to the end result and be able to create things that just blew my mind.
And those skills that they have in elementary school will be completely different when they're in the middle of their career. And so you just have to always keep finding those new things.
The skills may be different, but the fundamentals they accomplish will still be the same. And Shel, I was remembering those threatening moments in Journalism 101. And one thing we learned in Journalism 101 that hasn't changed is the fundamental importance of who, what, when, where, why, and how. And no matter what we use today, we're still answering those fundamental questions. And that will not change. The human need to connect does not change. And our ability to help feed the hunger does not change. The food changes all the time.
I had a news writing teacher, probably the most influential teacher I had in journalism school, who also taught us the 3 T's. I mean, this is just seared into my brain and resonates there all the time. The 3 T's are to keep it terse, tight, and telegraphic.
Ooh.
Like that?
Try to say that 3 times.
I like it.
Terse, tight, and telegraphic.
No, that sounds like a Friday night challenge to me.
Right, and that just keeps coming back to me every time we see some advance in the way organizations are communicating. And again, I come back to these 1 minute or 90-second videos that run with the audio off but big captions so that people know what's the messages that you're conveying. And man, do those have to be terse, tight, and telegraphic. And I think if you want to keep your career on track, you have to stay on top of these trends.
Yeah. I think there's a piece of that, though, that you can get overwhelmed by all of the technology options, whether it's which social media platforms are available or, video editing, caption writing, meme creation, any of those things. And one of the things that I've decided in my career all along is to kind of pick and choose which are the areas that I want to develop some deep expertise in, and which are the ones I just want to know enough to order it. It's like which ones are the leisure suits, and which ones are the lasting trends.
Well, I think that was the great thing. I mean, Sheri and Shel have taught more of us about technology than any schools we could have gone to and for years. And so if you kind of go, Sheri and Shel, to the fundamentals of your teaching, it has always been to look for the purpose, look for the objective, look for the outcome, and not to get caught up in the latest gadget. And it's always been at the heart of both of your points of view, and it's why your points of view are so constantly relevant.
Yeah, actually, my point of view on that has shifted a little bit. I agree that you can't get caught up in the latest shiny object, but I've also come to believe that you need to experiment when something comes out and see if there's something there for you.
Yeah.
You know, GE, General Electric, does a great job with this. There's a new communication app, and they're using it on the first day as an organization, not an employee, but General Electric is right there. There was one called Jelly from one of the founders of Twitter, and this was a tool that you would use to take a picture and ask a question about it. What kind of flower is this? How do I repair that? And the first day this thing was out, they had a picture of I think it was a latte, and in the foam was the atomic symbol. And the question they asked was, what scientist would you like to have coffee with, living or dead? And they had hundreds of responses the first day. And, you know, the thing didn't last, but I think they took learnings from this idea that you can throw out a quick question like that and get people engaged, and have applied it to other things. So in the spirit of, Sheri, you mentioned curiosity and experimentation with new tools. I think is important, even as we resist, drives me crazy when people talk about having a Facebook strategy, right? You have a content strategy, and Facebook is a channel, so, you avoid getting wrapped up in the shiny objects.
And but it's imagination, too.
I'm sorry. we all want to talk. I think one of the things when you talk about, going ahead and experimenting, and I see that more in the, particularly when it comes to technology through the agile process and the iterative process, where you're not necessarily building the entire thing out. You're putting it out there to test it with some people and see what the response is. That sounds like what GE did. I think that that's really important. I think that we have got to get beyond the stage of thinking we have to have everything completely finished, perfect, and ready before we roll it out.
Right.
And that's been true all along. I can remember 25 years ago saying, I need to talk with this about employees before it's completely wrapped up in a bow. We've got to start getting this message out. Well, it applies in the case of technology. It applies in whatever case it is. If we have to see this as a process, we can't. Everything changes too fast to wait for it to be finished before we can actually do something with it.
One of the nice things about digital is that with print, it had to be perfect. It had to be wrapped up in a bow, right? Mm-hmm. But with digital, you can try it and then tweak it and go to version 1.1.
It's also
no, please, Mark, go ahead.
No, all of this begs imagination, and that we imagine, and you see something and you imagine the ways that it can advance the relationship, and that's what keeps this profession so exciting, is that whether it's 2 cans and a string, or whether it's some app that lets me imagine the scientist in the latte, it's capturing my imagination, because if you capture my imagination, I want to take the ride, and that's what we're all about.
And I think it goes back a little bit to what you were saying, Alice, about needing to pick and choose what it is you wanted to spend your time delving into and what you really didn't have to do. And I think of it, probably it has the same result, but I think of it in a slightly different way. I think of it in terms of what interests me in my life, and if it's going to give me some guidance on how to do communication differently or better or something like that. For example, I have become really interested in neuroscience. Mm-hmm. And so, looking into neuroscience and how that affects relationships and affects how we communicate and so forth. I've always been interested in social sciences and culture, and that plays hugely into communication. It's not how you write the words or which tool you use to count, but it's, the whole thing makes a difference in how you end up being a communicator.
It's also not necessarily wanting to be all things to all people nowadays, right? So what we're seeing is a lot more collaborative learning and collaborative relationships, where you bring something to the table and you bring in the right people to deliver the whole. And that's what's really exciting about what's going on. Everybody discovers their purpose and they bring their talent to that collective.
Absolutely true.
I just want to remind people who are watching live that you can ask questions. It's over on the right-hand side of the screen over that way. So feel free to throw a question at the panel. I want to step back from the tech conversation a little bit. As we talk about building your career, I've run into a lot of people whose careers seem to be stymied, but all they focus on is communication, right? They go to communication conferences, and they're up to speed on communication trends and models, and they've looked at the research, but they don't know a damn thing about business. And if you ask them what the strategic plan is for the organization, I have no idea how many communicators I've talked to who don't know their own employer's business plan. And it seems to me that if you want to build your career and move up the ranks and ultimately have that, oh God help me, I'm going to use this cliche, seat at the table, that you have to have a good foundation in business. I'll tell you, one of the things that drives me nuts is when people in communications talk about ROI as a synonym for the benefit we derived from our communication, right? The ROI of this communication was employees understand this better, and that's not ROI, and they'll laugh you out of the boardroom if you try to use ROI in that way. So let's talk about how communicators can learn more about business if they're going to be able to apply their communication skills and competencies to helping the business.
Well, I think the short answer to that is take some time and do a different job and go run a part of a business, or go run a business, or start your own business. I think that part of what separates us from that reality is that we separate ourselves from that reality, and you know, my favorite saying that unfortunately too many people have heard is, this is a business, not an art colony. And I think sometimes we forget that. And so unless we are at the heart of what the business is trying to do and the relationships it must advance, we're not going to be there. It doesn't matter what chair we carry to the boardroom, there's not going to be room for us at the table.
One of the things I used to work for Canada's largest grocer, and one of the things I do is ensure that the teams would go out regularly to stores and spend time in stores talking to our colleagues, spend time with truck drivers and shipping and receiving, and take a tour of the distribution center. You know, listen to the VP. We had VP meetings on a regular basis to talk about initiatives, and I'd invite some of my team at different times to come in and listen to what was important, what were on the minds of those executives. So there's one thing about working in parts of the business, but there's a huge opportunity to get out into the business and listen and ask questions and really find out what keeps people up at night and what are the things that are really important to them.
I think the communication group brings a real role that's between the leaders and the people out in the front line. And if we can go out in the front line and talk to the employees out there and see what their real life problems are, and we're also talking to the CEOs and the executive vice presidents and those people and hearing what the strategy is, we can connect those every time we meet with them, not just when we do the formal communications, and then we really become part of that strategic conversation.
I think that the question that you asked originally, Shel, is how do we guide people to get this strategic viewpoint and understand more about the business? And in my experience, the problem has been why they should even do that. That my job is to create this content, to keep these deadlines, to keep this part of the communication running, and knowing why they should take time to do some of these other things to get closer to the business strategy, what the key objectives are, how they're being measured, so they can know how communication contributes to that. That's just a bigger piece of the puzzle that they need to have their eyes open to understand why that makes a difference in career progression. If they think that writing, being the best writer, being the best video producer, running the best social content is going to move their career forward, it's just not going to get them there. They have to see the broader picture.
Yeah, that's a really important point, I think, Sheri, and it leads to this idea of understanding, goals and measurement, because I think a lot of times we in this profession set the wrong goals and then measure the wrong things. I don't think there's a CEO alive who's losing any sleep about the email open rate.
But they are losing sleep about public opinion and action that comes from opinion. It's interesting, Sheri. I learn every time you speak. It's wonderful. And I was thinking about, I teach this Introduction to Public Relations course, and I looked at the textbook and I just had a reaction, because the textbook had chapter 1, the press release, and I just went, no, deliver me. And so it's interesting. So I said, no, we're not going to quite do that. And we started the class studying for the first 3 to 4 weeks public opinion and what shapes it and what people do with it. And then we worked backwards. And it was just kind of an experiment. But what my students told me that meant so much was, you made us feel this profession is big. And I never thought this profession was big. I thought it was this collection of little things that people do. I never realized it had this big impact. And maybe that's something we have to remind ourselves about, is that this is a widescreen profession, and we have a chance to make big differences.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the compliment, Mark, and I can turn it right back on you because I've learned so much from you over the years. But one of the things that I think holds us back as young and mid-career communicators is that if we haven't gotten a seat at the table yet, then that's often because we have a manager that is managing us to do things that are on the job description.
Yeah.
And what we do, that means you work, an extra 2 hours at home at night because you're doing this research on your own to get you to that point, or, whatever it might be, is you may be measured in your job for something that is not going to get you to that point, and you have to find out how you can get there on your own.
And that's where you do have to own your own career narrative, and you do need to look at other opportunities, and this is where I would plug IABC. IABC, as I've told people for years, is the best leadership development program out there, and it doesn't cost much.
Yeah.
And you have the chance in this association, if you commit and you go through these different jobs, to work with every personality type you will encounter the rest of your life. And you will learn the power and the importance of influence, and you will learn what it takes to persuade and to embrace and to engage. And so I think, Sheri, to your point, is so right that I can accept the limitations of my situation, or I can look beyond, and as I look beyond and find ways to develop, this is where to start, because this is such a development opportunity right in this association.
Yeah.
And I think there's a dimension of that a lot of people don't consider, and that is, if you do an inventory of the skills that you're going to need as a manager or as a leader, look at what you don't have, and you don't see an opportunity to do that in your current position, maybe there's an opportunity to do that on a chapter board. For example, I remember some people who wanted to take the finance job on a chapter board because they had no opportunity to manage budgets in their jobs, and they wanted to learn how to develop and manage a budget.
I did that. I did the finance role on the district board and learned a lot. And I luckily didn't embezzle or lose anything.
And I did that just recently with the brand. I'd had some work in my organizations supporting brand initiatives, but all of a sudden I got a chance to lead the global effort, and now that's turned into a part of my career that I didn't think it would become, because now people are starting to hire me for that expertise. So you never know what advantages you're going to get from that experience.
Right.
I think I'm seeing a trend here, because all of us have done far more IABC board work than most people even realize. But that is the kind of thing that moves you through in your career as a leader, and that's one of the things that is considered when you're under review for a fellow selection. And so that's absolutely something that people need to consider. Start with that finance role at your local chapter. That's a great place to start, and I did that too.
I do too.
Well, and I think that I graduated with a major in English, so I knew zip other than how to write.
And how to go to a library. That's what I tell people.
And how to go to a library and use the card catalog.
Right.
And the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature.
Right. Exactly.
And I can quote Jane Austen. That's
So the idea of business communication, I had to learn it from scratch. And I said this in my remarks at the Fellows presentation, but IABC was my graduate school, and that's how I look at it. And I learned finance. I learned how to manage people by managing volunteers before I ever had a staff. I learned how to coach people by reviewing accreditation portfolios and sending feedback before I ever had to coach people who were working with me. And I picked up all of these skills, and I'm a much better communicator. Looking back, I wish I had spent more time earlier looking at business strategy. I was kind of slow to come in on the fact that I probably needed to go take some business courses beyond finance for non-financial managers, and I wish I had done that. And that's the advice I would give somebody younger in their career who has the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, or just go take some business classes at the local community college.
Yeah.
But another issue that I saw come up again and again as I was doing some research to prepare for this was the idea of challenging leadership, letting them know when you think they're making a mistake, advising them to do things that may be outside of their comfort zone. I was looking at the Melbourne mandate a couple of weeks ago and reminded that the PR is supposed to serve as the conscience of the organization and counsel leadership on decisions that are going to reflect well on the organization's reputation. I think a lot of people probably are resistant to challenging leadership because they fear that they're going to be risking their careers by taking a contrary position. How did you handle that in your careers when you felt like you needed to tell the manager or the CEO that you thought they needed to do something different than what they were doing?
What I found is that just being able to find the influencers. Early in my career, they weren't going to trust me to go up and tell them what I thought and what I thought that they should be doing. But I did learn to find those folks who would listen to me and were courageous enough and had the ear of those leaders at first, and then slowly as those you start having those conversations and you realize they're listening, you start making your way up to have the courage to have those conversations as well. And there have been times where I thought if things didn't go the way I thought it was going to go, that I wouldn't have a job anymore. But luckily, 99.9% of the time I was right, and that builds your courage. But start with the conversation and start with those influencers, and you do find them.
So two adjectives that come to mind after that, Priya, is resilience and the thick skin.
Yeah.
And out of those two characteristics, I think you can do this. Fortunately, I do, and so I've had opportunities to do this. But yes, I mean, when you challenge, you're not going to win all of the time, and if you can deal with that, go back up and come in and do it again, you're going to have an opportunity to do it. I think that I have found, just in my situation, the way that I can usually get to a point of challenge that is not viewed as a challenge is what really makes a difference. It's not viewed as the fact that I'm challenging you. It's viewed as the fact that I bring a specific piece of knowledge or experience or something like that that you may not have heard yet. So let me give you my idea on this. And it's often something that's related to people instead of numbers, or something like that, that people are receptive to that, and they'll go with you on it. They might even put you in charge of it.
Yeah, I laugh because I just tell people I'm not chubby, I just have thick skin. So I think that this continuity between us is very clear, and I make this point when I coach, and that is, I think we can say anything if we have built the context. And context is essential to communication, and context is essential to the ability to challenge. Because when we build the context, we create an expectation that no matter what I may say, you'll know from where it's coming, and you'll know that it's coming from a place of support and a place of curiosity or a place of interest and a place of endorsement. That gives me the freedom then to challenge anything. And I think that we are the best challengers because we understand how humans react to moments. And the best we can anticipate those reactions, the most effectively we can challenge anyone, I think.
Yeah. I think that's really true, and part of that is, we're communicating to the leader the expected reaction based on the action they're about to take, but we're also able to predict that leader's reaction because we know those things, and so we can phrase or direct our feedback or comments in a way that is very positive, and with the idea that I understand where you're trying to go, and I think you're absolutely right. I think that it might be a more effective way to get there, or you might have this reaction if and just do it in a non-threatening way.
Yeah, we've been talking so far about building your career within an organization, but a lot of people want to advance their career by moving to another organization, different than the one they're already in. So when you apply for that job and the recruiter or the communicator, the hiring manager, starts looking at your CV and doing a little research on you, what do you hope they find? I mean, what happens when they Google you? And yeah, I wonder how important it is to do things like write posts on LinkedIn and get out and do speaking engagements, so that you build up that personal brand that becomes so important when you're marketing yourself to a hiring manager or a recruiter.
Well, I'll start by saying that I do all of those things. I write posts and I give presentations in all sorts of different venues, and I've had many jobs over my career, and I cannot think of a single one of them that happened any other way than somebody I knew recommended me for the job, and probably 90% of the time they were people through IABC who recommended me for the job. So it really is not just putting your brand out there, it's living your brand with people every day from day to day, and they want to recommend you.
Yeah.
I don't do as much in the way of posting as I think I should. I do public speaking, but I think that posting can really magnify your voice, and I intend to do more of that going forward, but I do think that it's important to know what your social profile is, as well as to expand your one-on-one network.
Yeah.
And also thinking of your reputation in general. Like part of it's that reputation socially, but there's also what's happening from a word of mouth perspective. And we've talked a little bit about volunteering. That if you give everything to your volunteer experience, that'll be a positive reference. But there's many people I've volunteered with that I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole because it wasn't the same experience. It wasn't the experience that I expected. And so I always, whenever I'm talking to or mentoring new communicators, I tell them to volunteer, but I also tell them to think about what they're willing to give, because that could impact their reputation positively or negatively based on how they manage.
But I do think that this is a matter of balance. And I mean, I love to speak, and I love to do that, and I love to write. What I have found, though, there were moments over the years where I was so busy speaking and so busy writing that I wasn't spending enough time thinking. And I think that we have to protect that time for ourselves to stay current, not only with what's happening in the world, but to stay current with what's happening within ourselves and our curiosity and what we believe.
Now, you talked about whether, if a potential employer Googles you, but everybody should be Googling themselves on a regular basis to make sure nothing.
Yeah, and here's a trick. When you Google yourself, do it in incognito mode if you're using Chrome, because then you're not logged in and you find out what a stranger is going to see when they Google you, as opposed to Google already knowing your preferences and your profile and delivering what it thinks you want to see. So that's just a good little trick there. But, Sheri, getting back to your point, the network is vital. A lot of the jobs that I've had have come through recommendations. But I guess the question is, how do you network in order to build those relationships? And a lot of them, I mean, certainly many of the relationships I've developed have come through people I have worked with, both on a job and through IABC. Or some of the other organizations I've been involved with. But a lot of it has come from people who got in touch with me after I wrote a post, or people who have seen me speak.
Or read your books.
Right. And, I have been, I'd say for the last 6 months, getting more involved in commenting in some of the communications groups on LinkedIn, and I suddenly find more people checking my profile out on LinkedIn, and there are people who are participants in these groups. I think that's also a way to build that network that can lead to that personal recommendation.
Yeah, well, I think, Shel, because your expertise is in technology, you better be using it.
Yeah, but the groups I'm talking to are employee communications and engagement groups, so conversations aren't so much about technology.
Okay.
And that may be true, Shel, because you are in a consultant role, and I am not in a consultant role now. So that, I'm sure, pays off for you in terms of people seeking you out. The equivalent that I would compare it to is how many headhunter calls I get. And they may be coming off of speaking or the posting or something like that. So, yeah, it does do a good job of getting your brand and your skills out there.
Yeah. And I think that, one of the sort of, it goes without saying, things that I'll say anyway is that, every time you post, you are representing your brand and your reputation. And so you need to manage that and manage what you say.
Well, we're down to about 7 or 8 minutes left.
Wow, that's gone fast.
In the panel. Oh, yeah, it sails right by. For those who are watching, this is your last chance to ask a question over on the right-hand side of the screen. So if you have a burning question about managing your career, guiding your career, now's the time. How important is it to build good relationships with people outside of the communication profession inside your organization? This was something I learned a little late in my corporate career, but in my last corporate job, the first thing I did was went over and met with the general counsel. I met with the head of IT. I met with the head of HR. And sort of initiated relationships where not only did they know they could call me when they had a communication challenge, but they would be willing to listen to me when I suggested that the approach they were taking to something was going to have not great repercussions from a communication perspective.
I think it's essential. In fact, one of the things I do with the people I coach is the proactive relationship map, where you draw a map through the organization and you say, I need this relationship and this relationship, and then how do you proactively build those relationships so that we don't wait to bump into somebody in the hallway, or we don't wait for that spontaneous moment. We instead schedule our spontaneity, and we proactively build the relationships outside of the comfort zone. I think, Shel, your point's essential.
I think that's very true.
The first 90 days on the job, when people say, well, what do I do when I walk in and I don't have a whole lot of work yet? Well, you do have a whole lot of work. I mean, that's when you get out and start talking to people, and somebody will just randomly say, oh, so you could help me with such and such. Yes. Shall we meet, 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon and do it? And so those sorts of things then build up to where you think, wow, I really ever was at the point that I didn't have a whole lot to do in this job. Now that I need to clone myself. So, but it really does make a difference, because you do build those relationships, and the work is directly with the people who need help solving a business problem, as opposed to, oh, I can write an article and post on our email newsletter about what your department does. And you don't want to be in that trap. You want to be out there solving problems for people.
One of my clients brought me in-house for a couple of years, and one of the first projects I had was to write a speech for the CEO, and it was to the industry association, and I found that the safety manager was very active in that association. So I called him up and I introduced myself and I said, I want to meet with you. I'm writing this speech. And I met with him, and not only did we build a relationship, but he had the insight into that particular event, and he gave me a clue about why that event was significant, that enabled me to build the speech around that. And I suddenly looked so brilliant, and I gave him credit for helping me. But that built a relationship that we had that remained strong for the 2 years that I was in-house there. And the other thing I did that reminds me of is I went to the industry association office, and I met with those people. It happened that our CEO was that year's chair of the association, so it was very relevant. But I think it's important to look at those important external relationships for your organization and be familiar with them, as well as building the internal relationships.
And thinking about it in terms of long-term relationships, one of the things that my husband laughs at me is I've stayed in touch with every single one of my bosses since I started, and they've been mentors. They've been, sometimes it's giving them a call once a year or meeting for coffee. But I'll tell you, when all of a sudden I decided to leave the corporate world and I was on my own and there was nobody there, it was really great to rely on those people to help me through that transition process, and just have an ear and somebody who was there for support. And now it's, again, it eventually leads to business, because you've got these relationships that aren't just inside communication, but are in the HR world and in the IT world and with marketers, and they've all moved on to other organizations. So it's just relationship building in general. You get so much out of it personally in terms of learning and growth, but it also can help you out as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just had lunch a couple of months ago with my boss from a job that I had 30 years ago. He's in his 80s and retired, and he and his wife were just traveling down here. But I remember, he wasn't a communicator. I reported to him, but he worked in organization development. And I thought reporting to somebody who didn't do what I did was a great experience. I ended up going to ASTD meetings, American Society for Training and Development. It really helped sort of flesh out my competencies by having that perspective on things.
Yeah.
So we're out of time. We have 1 minute left in the broadcast, so I want to thank everybody for participating. Those of you who are watching live, thank you for being here to watch us in real time. This will be available in both recorded video and as an audio podcast a little later today. Next month, we don't have a date set yet. That'll be coming out soon, but the editorial advisory board has designated the topic for July, social issue development and communication. And I think this is a big one because, as you may know, organizations are being held, their feet are being held to the fire these days for taking positions on societal issues, something that organizations assiduously avoided up until very recently. So I think that'll be a great conversation. So we'll be announcing the date and the panel within the next week or two. And until then, I hope everybody has a great rest of the week and a wonderful 4th of July weekend for those of you in the U.S. Priya, just have a great weekend.
All right. Thank you. This is fun.
Thank you, everybody.
Talk to you all soon.
Bye.
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 Thank you.